What is going on, football fans? Back at it with another New York Giants video, and I got a very special guest on today. Really excited when he reached out to me on Twitter. Sal Licata. I know I'm a huge Mets fan, so I see him all the time on SNY. Obviously, I talk mainly Giants here, so wanted to get his thoughts on the Giants, on the NFL draft, on the offseason, and of course, I'm always open to talking a little Mets as well. But Sal, how you doing, buddy? Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for asking. It's a pleasure to be here and have some fun talking sports where there's really no sports going on.
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely tough. I assume you reside in the New York area, right?
Yeah, Long Island. I'm Long Island.
Good stuff, man. So anyway, let's jump right into it. I figured we'd start with the off season with the Giants, the coaching staff, things of that nature. What did you think? I mean, I think most Giant fans going into the off season thought that we were probably moving on from Pat Shermer. But what did you think of the Giants' decision to move on from Pat but stick with Gettleman? Some Giants fans were kind of like it should have been a package deal, and some were surprised that they kept Gettleman on.
The problem is it really fair to fire anybody off of 2 years? I mean, I know that Shermer was overmatched, and you look at the season, especially the way it ended, the way that he handled the media. I don't think there's any question that Pat Shermer wasn't the right guy. So we all understood that, but then why'd you hire him? If you're going to fire somebody after 2 years, you really probably should stick it out a little bit. It's not like Shermer had immense talent with the roster that he could have been winning games. But anyway, so they move on from Shermer, which we could understand. But yet they keep the guy who hired him. And you could argue that Gettleman has been worse at his job than Pat Shermer. So ultimately, I don't think firing someone after just 2 years is fair. But I also don't think that Shermer was the guy, and I can understand why you're not going to completely blow it up and fire the GM as well. They were in a weird spot. Normally, I would clean house. You're going to fire one, you fire both. I thought probably the best thing to do would have been to give them one more year together and then blow it up in one shot. The problem is they knew that they didn't have the right guy with Shermer, so now we'll wait. But you know what's going to happen? Giants don't win this year, or they don't have any success with some of the players getting in the draft. Then it's going to be about, okay, well, when's Gettleman getting canned?
Yeah, and that's what actually, it's funny that you say that. It's what I express to my subscribers all the time. A lot of my subscribers got on me for that, for saying that I actually was in favor of keeping Shermer, even as bad as he was doing, just to keep familiarity. You got a young team, you got a first-year quarterback. I completely understood with the New York market, the pressure, you got to, I understood why they got rid of Shermer, and I think the only reason they got Shermer in the first place was because nobody wanted to come here because they had Ben McAdoo. They fired him after 2 years, and it's an organization that seems to be falling in the trap of like the New York Knicks. The Knicks always fire their coaches after a year or two. The Giants didn't used to be that way. They've now gone through 3 coaches in the last 5 years.
Right.
Gettleman's on the hot seat now from everything you hear. If he doesn't get the job done this year, I'm kind of 50-50 with Gettleman. I think he does a good job in terms of drafting. Some of his trades were good. I was actually in favor of the Beckham trade. I thought they got as much as they could before it got to the point that it would have been, for instance, you look at DeAndre Hopkins. They only got a second-round pick. I think Beckham was a ticking time bomb. I think that they saw a young quarterback that they didn't want him to do what he was doing to Eli. I actually thought it was a good move, but obviously the Leonard Williams trade to me was absurd. It was a fireable offense. Let me get your take on that one, the Leonard Williams trade. I think most Giant fans agree that it was a bad trade. You give up a third and a fifth-round pick, or now a fourth-round pick, I think, to bring in Leo Williams when he was going to be a free agent anyway. But what I want to get is your take on what do you think Gettleman's mindset was when he made the trade? Like, why did he make the trade?
Well, you know that they need defensive players, right? So I think Gettleman's thinking, okay, here's a guy we can maybe get in their mind at a good value. The Jets want to move on from him. We need to add defensive players any which way that we possibly can. Okay, we'll give up a third-round pick for Leonard Williams. We'll bring him in, and we hope to sign him. The problem is he didn't see, I don't know how he didn't understand this, that he lost all leverage once you do that. Now you bring it in. Just wait. Just wait for free agency. Now you bring him in. You give up a pick to get him, number one, and now you got to pay him whatever he wants. And I wouldn't franchise tag him either because he's not worth that much, Leonard Williams. He's not that good. He could be an okay player. So I think Gettleman got into a situation where he was desperate for defensive players. They overvalued what Leonard Williams is. Leonard Williams was supposed to be much better. If he were that good, the Jets would have kept him. So he's supposed to be much better than what he is. I just think he's an average player on a team, though, that desperately needs defensive players. So from that end of it, I kind of understand it. He didn't have to make a trade, though, at that time. and give up a pick when he knew, or you should have at least known that he didn't have any leverage once free agency came. What do you think was going to happen? Williams was going to be in love with the Giants and all of a sudden give him a hometown discount. So, and by the way, I'm with you on the Odell trade. I know that we're probably in the minority there. But I think that's one that Gettleman should get some credit for. Now, I rip him for drafting Saquon Barkley #2. I would never, ever, 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 ever take a running back that high, especially when you look at their situation. So that's a big one against, but a big one for in the favor of Dave Gettleman would be the way he handled Odell Beckham Jr. I think the Giants did have all the intentions in the world of keeping him when they signed him. They didn't pay him to trade him, but you know what? He didn't change. He kept running his mouth. And Gettleman knew eventually they have to get rid of him. And that's a tough decision to make when you knew that the fan base is going to be against him. I'm sure some of the organization were against that. That's a very tough decision to make. So I actually, I'm in favor of Dave Gettleman for making that trade with Odell.
Yeah, I think it showed a lot of guts for him to make that move. In terms of the Leo Williams trade, I'm thinking it from Williams' perspective. He's got to be thrilled right now because he's getting $16-17 million on the franchise tag. And if I'm his agent, I know a lot of times when you're on the franchise tag, you want to try to negotiate a 4 or 5 year deal. But with the cap going up by 15% next year, usually it goes up by 5 or 6%. It's tripling. What's the incentive for Williams not to play out the franchise tag? You're getting your fully 16-17 million guaranteed. Right. And then if he's basically what he was, his market value right now is probably 13, but you up that by about 15%, you're talking 15-16 in next year's market. So if you're Leo Williams, you just play out the franchise tag.
Well, for him, yeah, I think it's fine. For the Giants,
it's horrible.
I have a hard time. Yeah. Right. For the Giants, now they're doing it because they don't want to just look like complete fools and say that we wasted a draft pick for no reason. That's why they franchise tag him. But now they wasted a draft pick and they're paying top dollar for Leonard Williams. So that it doesn't add up to me. If they came to a long-term, even if they came to a long-term agreement with him, I still don't love Leonard Williams as a player. So I get that they need guys. Yeah, I didn't like that move from Gettleman. It also just didn't make any sense. If they wanted him, they could have just waited until free agency and then take a run at him.
Yeah, that to me is the biggest knock on Gettleman, that trade. In terms of the offseason, free agency as a whole, how do you think the New York Giants did? The one thing that stuck out to me was they had a plan. They brought in a lot of guys with familiarity with the coaching staff, and everything was short-term deals, 3-year deals or less. I think they're trying to ensure that they have cap space going forward for the next 3, 4, 5 years so they could retain players like Barkley and Jones. But overall, what did you think of the plan, and what did you think of the players that they brought in?
Yeah, I think it's okay. I think it's solid. I don't think there was anything, oh, wow, I can't believe it. I mean, you bring in Bradbury. You love that. A solid cornerback. I mean, they desperately need that. Look, they need players on defense. You can look at the linebackers that they brought in. I don't know where the fans really want the splash to be made here, because this is not where the Giants are at. They're bringing in basically bodies that can fill in. They're not bringing in game-changing players in free agency. It's all going to change through the draft. So it's hard for me to sit here and say, oh, yeah, well, they were great in free agency or they were really smart, or the opposite. Well, I didn't like some of these moves. They were whatever moves. They're filling out the roster type moves. You want to talk about the Fackrell, if he's going to be an impactful linebacker? Who knows? Martinez, these guys are going to be solid players. We don't know. We have to see it play out, but they're not going to be game changers. They're going to be guys who are going to help the coaching staff get their message across, which I think is important with a young team that's trying to develop young players on defense. So I like that. I like familiarity with the coaches, because obviously the coaches wouldn't bring them in if they didn't trust the players to go out there and do as they say. So I like that. I think they were solid. But really, this team is not going to be a playoff team in all likelihood anyway this year. It's about the development of a young head coach and a young quarterback. So the free agency so far has been about just bringing in bodies. Where we're really going to find out what this team does is through the draft, and not only this year, but obviously in years past, how those players now develop in years 2, years 3 under Dave Gettleman drafted them.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, and I think the plan, basically from what they've said leading into free agency, months before, you heard the owner, you heard Gettleman, we're not going to go hog wild. They're going to bring in guys that they're familiar with. Fackrell, played with Graham. Martinez played with Graham. They all played with somebody. Bradbury was drafted by Gettleman. And I actually thought it was important to address the veteran cornerback spot. I like that they got Bradbury on a 3-year deal, not a 5-year deal like Byron Jones got. Now you've got a guy only on a 3-year deal. You could get rid of him probably after 2 years if it doesn't work out. He's 26 years old. And DeAndre Baker, I think it's very important for him to develop this year, being his second year. And now you're not putting the pressure on him. Now he's going to be your second corner. And I'm excited to see the coaching staff, the situations that they put Baker in, because last year, as much as I was actually in favor of Betcher when they brought him in, he did a great job with Arizona. we didn't have the players to fit his scheme. And then he tried to bring in recycled players like Dayon Buchanan, Marcus Golden. Golden played well for us, but we didn't have the players to fit his scheme, and he tried to kind of fit square pegs into a round hole. I feel like I feel like they're bringing in the right players to fit what Patrick Graham is trying to do and what Joe Judge is trying to do.
Well, that's one thing that I do love about the Giants going into this year. I loved, and again, we don't know, we're going to find out, but I loved everything I heard from Joe Judge. So I kind of trust him, even though he's a rookie head coach here. I trust Joe Judge knows what it takes to build a team. And I think that's important. It's not just about bringing in talent. It's not fantasy football here where you need talent all over the place and explosive receivers. No, you need to build a team, especially in the situation the Giants are in where they've been so bad now for so long. So they're trying to build a team, bringing in players that they're familiar with and having guys that are going to buy into their system and be team players and build the culture. I know everybody hates that word, but build the culture. Well, I trust Joe Judge to do that, but it's going to take some time. It's not just all of a sudden going to happen. You bring in some players, you flip a switch, and then the Giants can go out there and be world beaters. That is not going to be the case. So we have to see. You and I, nobody knows. The Giants themselves don't know. We have to see what Joe Judge is going to be, how he applies his philosophy to the team, how the team goes out there and responds, how they deliver that message every Sunday or whenever, Monday or Thursday, whenever the Giants are playing. Every game in, game out, how they go out there and compete. I'm excited to see it, but I don't think that it's an excitement level of, okay, let's hope that the Giants can make the postseason this year. I don't think that's realistic. I think you look at Daniel Jones, and I think you look at Joe Judge and how hard that team plays, how competitive they are week in, week out.
Yeah, let's get into the Joe Judge hiring a little bit. I did a little research on him when I first heard that the Giants were going to interview him, but before that, I knew nothing about the guy. I said to myself, special teams coach, usually you want to be, especially the Giants. The Giants are an old school organization. Generally, when they're bringing in a coach, he's somebody with some experience, right? Whether he's a prior head coach, whether he's an OC, DC, they bring in a special teams coordinator. And really, until they brought him in, I didn't realize how valuable it could be to be a special teams coordinator, being that you get familiarity on both sides of the football. You kind of have this mindset where you try to get the most out of the least talented players on your roster. And you can actually make an argument that a special teams coordinator, when you really think about it, is just as important in terms of looking for a head coaching candidate as an OC or a DC. You look at Harbaugh had success.
Sure.
And I think Tomlin, if I'm not mistaken, was a special teams coordinator at some point in his career, and he came in with very limited experience. So what did you think of the hiring of Judge? I was surprised that the Giants did it, but after they brought him in with the interview and everything else, I was incredibly impressed. And the one thing that really impressed me, much like free agency, he had a clear plan with every coach that he brought in. He's got familiarity with everybody on this roster, so I was really impressed with his CEO mentality. Of course, we don't know until we see the results on the field.
Right.
Like you said, though, I'm kind of I'm not really judging this team until the second year of Joe Judge because you got to let it play out. But I want to get your thoughts on Joe Judge.
Well, that's a huge thing, first and foremost. This is not 1 year, 2 year, not even 3. I mean, Joe Judge is going to be here for the long term. Giants aren't making a change there. They may change Gettleman along the way. Joe Judge is going to be their guy for the foreseeable future. They can't change him again after 2 years or 3 years. They've been through this already a couple of different times with McAdoo and Shermer. Cannot happen anymore. At first, I wasn't sure of the hire because I didn't think that they got their guy. I thought they wanted Matt Rule, and then it looked like from the outside, well, then they had to settle. Not to mention that you're running with ownership and a general manager who, how could you trust based off of the way things have gone the last several years? They're the ones who are making this decision. So it looked like they got burned. They didn't get Rule. They end up settling on a no-name guy that we've never heard of before, who's a special teams guy. I don't mind the special teams coordinator. You reference Harbaugh. That to me doesn't matter. But when you see Joe Judge go out there and handle the media the way that he did that first day, that was impressive. That's something that Shermer and McAdoo couldn't do on their best days, let alone their first day as a first-time head coach. That should not go overlooked. Now, does it mean that he's going to be Bill Parcells or Vince Lombardi? No, but that was impressive. For the guy to go in there and control that room of vicious New York media members who are looking to make him uncomfortable. He was as comfortable as you can be, and he was in command of that room. He was very sure of himself. So I don't know how he's going to be as a head coach because we haven't seen him actually be a head coach yet. But I do know that what I saw in that press conference would give me confidence. If he has that much confidence to be able to go in there and command that room on day one and control that room and be totally comfortable with himself and his football beliefs, I am comfortable and confident in believing in him that he can get this football team to be competitive and get this team to play hard. And I think he's going to be a good head coach just based on that alone. Now, to your point, I like that he's had a plan, they're letting him execute his plan as well, which should not go overlooked.
Yeah.
Bringing in coaches that he wanted. Remember, there was talk about who's going to be the offensive coordinator or defensive coordinator. Are they going to force guys on him, or is he going to get to pick his staff? To the Giants' credit, they let Joe Judge pick his staff. Then that staff works together on bringing in players that they know are going to fit that system. To me, that sounds like it's a well-oiled working machine right now. At least before we get started here, we know what it's going to be. Now, they have to go out there. They have to execute. It's going to take years to see it pan out. But I think the Giants got the right guy in Joe Judge. I do believe in him. I think he's going to be a good leader for them.
I'm completely with you on that. I mean, like we said, both said, you got to wait to see how it plays out on the field. And again, I'm not judging the wins and losses this year. And the other thing, it just seems like they're all working so collaboratively. They all go to the combine together. You never see that. The entire coaching staff, the running back coach, the offensive, everybody was there. And to me, it just shows you that Joe Judge wants everybody to have a say. He wants everybody to have their input on the team, which I think is valuable. It's something that Shurmur didn't do. Shurmur called the plays. He didn't even let the offensive coordinator call the plays, which isn't uncommon in the NFL. I think Shanahan does it with the 49ers. A lot of times you'll see specialists become head coach, and then they have more of a role. But I like the old school approach, the CEO mentality, where he says, you're going to do your job, you're going to do your job, and I'm kind of going to oversee it. And then talking about the staff, I wanted to kind of get into Garrett a little bit. Obviously, former head coach, Dallas Cowboys, rivalry. I've been making fun of him for years, but I actually liked the hire when they brought him in because you go back and look at Garrett's career as an offensive coordinator. Did a great job with Tony Romo early on as an OC. Then he gets a fourth-round quarterback with Dak Prescott. So he has success with quarterbacks maybe with not the highest of expectations. Of course, he had an all-pro offensive line. That certainly doesn't hurt. But I think Garrett was a good hire in terms of an OC, and especially when you got Daniel Jones, a second-year quarterback, to bring in an offensive coordinator that has a success rate with quarterbacks in the past. That's kind of his calling card. I thought it was a good move by the Giants to bring in Garrett, plus his experience with an inexperienced head coach.
I don't think there's any question about that with Jason. Look, and he's a great guy. I mean, he's familiar with the organization. He's a classy individual. I think the Giants were in need of bringing in somebody like Jason Garrett. Now, the problem is he's not the head coach, right? This is still Joe Judge, so it's hard to bring in a guy that has a bigger profile as Jason Garrett and not be talking about him, but it's really not. It's not his team. He's still just the offensive coordinator, and I think that that's important that he sticks to that role. You know, the media shouldn't be speaking to Jason Garrett. They should be speaking about Joe Judge and to Joe Judge after these games. That's what it's going to be. And Garrett, though, because he was, so well talked about in Dallas, and whether he was made fun of for being the clapper or whatever else you wanted to chew on the gum, and the Cowboys' lack of success, I guess, according to some people. Look, I like Garrett. I think he could be. I think he is a good head coach. You look at his record. How does Ron Rivera get another job immediately when you look at his dreadful record with the Panthers? But yet Jason Garrett is looked at. Oh, come on, the guy was all he does is finish 500 every year. Yeah, he never had the ups and downs that Ron Rivera had.
True.
I mean, come on, Jason Garrett's a solid head coach. So the fact that the Giants could get him as an offensive coordinator and be a veteran guy that Joe Judge could look to when he has some questions about certain things. Garrett has been down that road before. So I'll put it this way. I think he's an asset to any organization that would have hired him. And the Giants were fortunate enough to be able to have Jason Garrett there. This is not a spot where Joe Judge needs to look over his shoulder. It is not a spot where Jason Garrett will ever become the head coach of this football team, but he will be an asset for this team. I think it's going to help both Garrett move on to the next level, and I think it'll help the Giants having him there as part of their organization.
I agree with you, and the other thing that I like about Garrett is I feel like he's kind of he's got to prove himself again. So I feel like he's not going to be a one-year hire. I feel like he's going to have to be here for at least 2 years as the OC, and Daniel Jones is going to have a lot of success for him to move on, which is going to move me to my next thing I wanted to talk about. Daniel Jones, his rookie year, what you thought of it, and what you think he needs to work on and improve on to get to that next level, and whether or not you could see him being the next Eli Manning, the next guy that's going to be the guy here for 15 or 16 years.
Yeah, see, I think that's tough to predict. I know that everybody can look at him and say, okay, well, look at his talent. And he's got – look, I didn't like the draft pick because the stuff that I heard about Daniel Jones going in made me question what he was going to be as a quarterback at the next level, right? But then you watch him play, and even as far back as the preseason, you can tell sometimes right away whether a guy has it or whether he doesn't. And Daniel Jones – even early on in preseason, didn't look overmatched. He looked like he belonged as an NFL quarterback. So for me thinking a guy was going to be a total bust to seeing that, I was like, oh, all right, maybe they got something here. And then you watch him when he took over in the regular season, and you can tell. Now, I mean, I literally had people calling me on WFAN the week after saying that, oh, he's going to be better than Tom Brady and Peyton Manning. So
Oh, God.
you do have to temper expectations. I'm not so sure he's going to be better than Eli Manning. We already know he's not as durable as Eli Manning was because he's already missed games due to injury. And then you talk about going on, to win 2 Super Bowls. That doesn't happen all the time. So the Giant fan, I think right now, it's easier for them to look at Eli Manning in the last couple of years and be frustrated with it. Easy to forget what a great quarterback he was, a guy you could rely on every day for 14 years, whatever it was, go out there and be under center every snap for every game that you ask him to be there for. I mean, that is incredible. What was he, 17 years, 16 years? What was he?
He was drafted in 04, so yeah.
Right, 04.
Yeah, 16 years, I think.
There you go, right, 16 years. So, and I was happy to be at his first game. It was against my Atlanta Falcons, the first game that he started, I'm pretty sure, back in, was it
2005, probably. I know he was drafted in 04, so let me do the math.
Right,
yeah,
but whatever
04,
it was.
I think, yeah.
I remember being at his first game that he started because it was against Michael Vick and my Atlanta Falcons. But anyway, since he took over, he didn't miss a snap.
Yeah.
I mean, think about that. You didn't have to worry about that for essentially 16 years. You didn't have to worry about who your quarterback was going to be. With Daniel Jones in year 1, you already had that concern. So I think he's got some ability. I like him as a leader. I like his ability to throw the football. I like the fact that he can move around a little bit. But I worry about him being durable long term. And I still think there's a lot of things we need to see him improve on. Now, he was a rookie. Rookies are not supposed to be great. He had some really good, and he had some really bad. He's got to be better at decision-making and all that stuff. Also, a new offense now with Joe Judge taking over with Jason Garrett. That's going to change things up. So essentially, it's like year 1 starting over for Daniel Jones. But I think he's got the potential to be a franchise quarterback. I'm not going to say he's going to be a top 10 or even top 15 in the league, but I think he's got the potential to be a solid franchise quarterback, but a very long way to go before we figure that out with Daniel Jones.
You brought up a great point about Eli Manning. I think it is I'm the biggest Eli Manning fan in the world, so you're talking to the right guy. I think it's the most underrated attribute of his entire career was his durability. People take that so much for granted. You bring it up. Daniel Jones has already missed more games in his career than Eli Manning did due to injury, and I'm completely with you on that. I think it's something that goes undervalued. In terms of Daniel Jones, the things that stick out to me, like you said, he's got most of the tools. The guy's got some mobility. He's got a stronger arm than people projected. He's smart. He's a hard worker. Everything you hear about him, first in, last out, seems to be the type of guy that could really handle the New York media. I think that was a big attraction for why the Giants brought him in. But at the end of the day, it was 12 games. You got to take it with a grain of salt. It was a much better rookie year than what Eli Manning had, but let's not forget everything Eli Manning did, and let's hope Daniel Jones could deliver to the New York Giants what Eli Manning did. If he does that, we'll be ecstatic. And really all that the New York Giants need from Daniel Jones, be a slightly above average quarterback, fix that offensive line, get a strong defense, get back to Giants football, run the ball down people's throats. That's what I want. I'm old school. I want to fix that O-line, and I want to get that defense back to where it should be and stay on the field and make the plays when they need to be made. I think a lot of people look at the modern-day NFL, they look at fantasy football, and they think you got to have a Pat Mahomes. And not to say that hurts, but at the end of the day, you need your quarterback to make the right decisions when they need to be made and to make the plays when they need to be made. But it's a 53-man sport. It's a team sport, and I just need Daniel Jones to be good. I don't need him to be great. That's my mindset.
Right, and I think you and I are in agreement here with our philosophy. Some people, go differently where they'd like to have the explosive wide receiver and the quote-unquote fantasy type. To me, it doesn't work like that. You build from the inside out, and you don't need to have Daniel Jones be ever the best quarterback in the league. Eli Manning was never, you could argue, was never top 5. I mean, maybe you can't even, not top 5 in the league, but in the postseason, twice. It wasn't just one incredible run. It was 2 of the more incredible runs the sport has ever seen. That's where you need him to be at his best. And also, to your point, it was based off of having a tremendous defense and a great, consistent ground game. That is the missing piece for me. When I look back over this Giants team over the last, I guess it's almost 10 years now, they have not had a consistent ground game. That's something that you need. Every quarterback would benefit from having a consistent ground game. That is why I don't think Tom Brady is going to have success with the Buccaneers because I think Bruce Arians is going to throw it too much. I don't think they have a good offensive line. He's not going to be protected well enough to let those plays develop downfield, and they don't have a good ground game to offset the pass rush that Brady's going to face. With the Giants, their bread and butter used to be running the football, and it's not just Saquon Barkley. I've seen Saquon Barkley. I'm not saying he's not a great back when healthy, but you don't need a great back. You need an offensive line where you can run consistently. Barkley doesn't do that. Yeah. He'll break a 60-yard run, an 80-yard run, whatever. Where's he the rest of the game? I'd rather have guys that can move the chain, control the clock, shorten the game up, and then have your quarterback, in this case Daniel Jones, make big plays when he needs to. 3rd and long, maybe nothing's there. Jones takes it and runs with it, gets the first down, changes the game a little bit right there. You can run it consistently, control the game, and then have your quarterback make big plays off of that. So I'm with you. Giants, and I think Gettleman wanted to do this, but he did it the wrong way. They need to figure out a way to be able to run the football consistently. That is the only way they will get back to having consistent success. Not the running back. That's the offensive line, and that's obviously a spot I'm looking forward to seeing them upgrade in the draft that's coming up in a couple of weeks.
And I can't wait to get into that talk real quick. And you bring up the ground game and everything else. Another quarterback I want to point to, Drew Brees. Look at the New Orleans Saints. Drew Brees, 4 or 5 years ago, was throwing for 5,500 yards, whatever he was throwing for, breaking records. They're winning 5 or 6 games. Then they go out there, they invested 2 first-round offensive linemen. Now they got one of the best offensive lines in the sport. Now you ask Brees to be more of a game manager. He's throwing for like 3,900, 4,000 yards. He's doing better by doing less because they're running the ball. They're becoming a more balanced team. Right. And I think everybody, when they think of the Saints, they think of this aired-out football team. That's not the case. When they're at their best winning 12, 13 games, they're what the Giants used to be. They're a team that runs the ball and throws it when necessary, even with a big name like Drew Brees. And that's the way you win in football, is balanced. You know, everybody wants pass.
Right.
You gotta be able to have both. And to have both, you have to have a good offensive line. And it's something that the New York Giants have to invest in. And let's get to the draft. I'm assuming, based on what you're telling me, if you're the New York Giants at pick number 4, maybe you're looking to trade down. I know a lot of people are very high on Simmons, but you seem to be leaning tackle if you're the Giants.
Yeah, I probably would lean tackle. Now, again, we don't know how the draft is going to play out. We're assuming Burrow's going to go number 1 to the Bengals. I guess most people are assuming Young is going to go number 2 to the Redskins. Who knows? I mean, maybe the Redskins decide that they want to change it and go for Tua as opposed to rolling with Haskins. So we don't know. But even if it goes chalk, what happens with the Lions pick? Does somebody trade up to get Tua there? And then that will change the Giants. If they don't, if that goes chalk to the Giants, then themselves want to trade down. I do think we're going to see some activity in that top 4 to 5 pick range there. Well, I guess not. Yeah, because Miami's number 5. But we're going to see somebody, I think, leapfrog where they're at, leapfrog Miami to try to get a quarterback. Or Miami themselves moving up to guarantee that they get a quarterback. So I think you'll see some movement there with 2, 3, or 4. So where do the Giants stand? Do they love Simmons that much that they can't trade down? Are they going to take him at number 4? Do they love any one of the offensive linemen that much with number 4? I'm fine with it. I have a hard time trusting Gettleman based on what we've seen, but you have no choice but to trust him here. I wouldn't be opposed if they traded down and still got their guy. Maybe they could get Simmons later, a few picks later, or maybe they could get an offensive lineman that they love a few picks later. I wouldn't trade down too far. But me personally, I don't think Simmons is a player who is going to change their defense entirely. And I don't think they're close enough anyway for that to matter. I would go offensive lineman, give me a tackle that you could put in there for the next 10 to 15 years with Daniel Jones. That's the way that I personally – they need to rebuild that offensive line. They've needed to do it for quite some time. There seems to be some great potential here in this draft with the linemen. I would go in that direction. Whether they trade down a few picks or not, to me, I'd probably go offensive lineman.
Yeah, to me, that's the long-term thinking. You've got a second-year quarterback. You got to make sure he's got a foundation at the end of the day. I say it all the time. You got a fancy car. You want to make sure you got top-of-the-line insurance. Well, that's the offensive line. You got to be able to block for the kid. You have to be able to open up holes for Saquon Barkley to establish the run. And it may not have the immediate impact that Simmons would have. I would think Simmons, year 1, probably has an extra win or two as opposed to an offensive tackle. Might take the tackle a couple of years to get to his full form. He's playing right tackle. You probably switch him over to the left at some point when you get rid of Nate Solder. But I'm with you. If I'm long-term thinking, the other thing that you mentioned earlier that was a great point, Daniel Jones now learning a new offense, second-year offense. You got to do everything you can to help this kid. They haven't done him many favors. They've switched the head coach. They've switched the offensive coordinator. He's got to learn a whole new playbook. You got to help him out a little bit. You got to improve that offensive line. You lose Remmers, not that he was great, but he was experienced. You bring in Cam Fleming, who's been a swing tackle his entire career. you got to help him out. You got to get him. You got to get him some talent on the offensive line. So more so that than anything else, knowing that this is a 2, 3, 4 year fix. Isaiah Simmons isn't going to put this team over the top in one draft. I would sooner try to address the thing that I feel is the biggest problem long term, and that's the offensive line. That's why I would go tackle.
Yeah, I think it's important for that team. You remember too, they I hated the pick, but they do have Saquon Barkley. They're built to be able to. I mean, they need to have the offensive line to be able to run the football and protect a young quarterback. If there were any team that desperately needed an offensive line, it's them. Help out the young quarterback in essentially year one here with a new head coach, new offense, and help out your star player and Saquon Barkley a little bit. So I think they need to really beef up the offensive line. And whether they do it or not, I mean, it's imperative that they hit on in this draft and on these top picks, especially the top pick, because they can't have too many more. You cannot waste a 4th pick overall or wherever it ends up being if, in fact, they do trade down. You don't want to be here again next year. Even in a year of development, you hope that it's still a year where they can win 6, 7 ball games next year, maybe even get to 8-8. I think that would be a positive thing for this team. And, you're not worried about a top pick. Unfortunately, they've been here picking, top of the draft a couple of times now. It can't, more than a couple of times. It can't happen much longer. So they need to hit. And I personally would prefer them getting a staple on that offensive line if they could.
Yeah, and then you mentioned real quick about trading down. Of the teams they could potentially trade down with, I think the most realistic teams are the Dolphins, the Chargers, maybe the Jaguars at 9 and 20, the Raiders possibly at 12 and 19. What do you think is the most realistic, and what do you think is the ideal spot for them to trade down?
I think ideal for them would be Chargers or Dolphins, because now you're talking about adding extra picks and you're only moving down a couple of spots to where you could still get your player. I mean, the Giants could trade down, add picks, and still get the guy that they wanted. I don't know if it's going to be realistic to trade down much further than that. Maybe. I mean, where do you get the Jaguars? Yeah, Jaguars not that bad either. Still out of the top.
They got 2 picks. They got 9 and 20, so that would be the projected trade.
Right. So you would take Jack. Right. I mean, I guess that would be okay because you could still probably get one of your guys at number 9. Look, I have no problem with Jacksonville. I don't know what it's going to take for those teams to get up to number 4. Maybe that's what it would be for Jacksonville. Would you do that? That would probably be a great scenario. We get 2 first-round picks. You get an extra first-round pick. I don't think you're getting that back from Miami or from the Chargers if they move up just 1 or 2 spots. But my goal would be to add as much as I can. It sounds simple. Add as much as I can without moving as far back as I would have to. The problem that they have is they may not be in a position of power. Let's say New England decides to shock everybody and trade up with Detroit for number 3. I mean, that could happen.
That would be a hell of a trade. You're jumping 20 spots.
Well, I mean, I'm just throwing it out there. Yeah. I mean, we've seen nutty stuff happen before. Yeah. So let's it doesn't have to be New England. It could be somebody else. But I was thinking of quarterback, a team that needs a quarterback.
Yeah.
If they love Tua, let's say Belichick loved Tua. I mean, maybe they do it. Now, I don't think that that's realistic, but point is you don't know who's going to jump in front of them with the Lions. The Lions really hold all the cards at this point because you assume the Bengals and the Redskins are going to go chalk. That would mean the Lions hold all the cards. Who is going to be the team that wants to leapfrog them and trade up? Jacksonville may sound nice, but why would Jacksonville do it? Don't they love their guy with Minshew? So they really, they got the 9 and the 20 pick. If I'm them, I'd probably stick with Minshew and then take my 2 first-round picks. So, yeah, that would be great if you could get that. I don't know if that's realistic or not. So it'll be fun to see, though, that's for sure. But either way, I think that they just have to be smart about it and make sure that they get this one right. This is not one that they can mess up.
Yeah, I'm with you. Dolphins or Chargers, I think, are the most realistic. I think the only way the Jaguars make sense, there's two ways the Jaguars to me could potentially make sense. One, they don't think Minshew's the guy. They think last year was a fluke. He's like a 4th-round pick. They're rebuilding. They see a guy they're in love with at the quarterback position. The other thing that I could see being a possibility, Unique Ngakoue, of course, people have talked about him time and time again, a tag and trade scenario with the Giants. That's been rumored. I think they're going to trade him. I don't necessarily think it'll be the Giants. So those are the 2 areas where I could see it making sense. Giants drop from 4 to 9 and they bring in Unique Ngakoue. That's the trade. Something like that. Those are the 2 ways I could see it potentially making sense. But I'm with you. I think the Chargers and the Dolphins make by far the most sense. And yeah, man, I just want to say thank you for coming on. I wish we could have talked a little Mets. I'm a huge Mets fan, but unfortunately we got no baseball right now. Hopefully we get that back by June because I was excited for this year. We brought in Betances. We beefed up that bullpen a little bit.
You kind of look like Matt Harvey. Has anybody told you that before?
I got a quick story about Matt Harvey. I've gotten that a few times. I went to Mike Piazza's Hall of Fame induction ceremony. I'm at the Hall of Fame. I go in to see his bust and everything. And I'm in the Hall of Fame. After I went to the speech, I got my Met hat on, I got my Piazza jersey on, and this little kid, he's like 7 years old, taps me on the back, and he puts a ball in my face. And he asked me for Matt Harvey's autograph, and I'm like, no, yeah, but I have gotten Matt Harvey a lot, yeah.
Yeah, I could see that. That's what I thought of immediately when I first saw you. But no, we'll do some Mets maybe another time. Unfortunately, we don't have baseball season to talk about at the moment, which stinks because I'd rather be at work, no offense, than sitting here talking to you. But
I get it, man.
Every time we can make this work.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you coming on, man, and thank you for taking time out of your day to come onto my channel and just talk sports in general. And I'd love to have you on again at some point.
No problem. Appreciate you having me, and we'll do it again soon.
You got it, Sal. Thank you.